Let's talk about the college football games we saw this weekend. Starting with the Alabama at Mizzou game, Alabama Crimson Tide won 38-19. Going into this game, they had returning wide receiver Jaden Waddle, Devonta Smith, and then running back Najee Harris and 4 O-line returners. Last year, Alabama's weak spot was the run defense. It was 43rd ranked in 2019. Then looking at Mizzou, they had a new coach and a roster turnaround. Their specialty last year was pass defense and scoring defense. They're ranked 13th and 15th. And they just got former TCU quarterback Sean Robinson, who took over Kelly Bryant's spot. And I think it could be a good pick. I mean, he's pretty explosive. So the result of the game, as mentioned, Alabama took care of business. Quarterback Mac Jones had 2 TDs and 249 yards, and he played pretty good. Even top recruit Bryce Young made an appearance. He had 54 yards and threw 5 for 8 passing. But he had fumbles, which kind of cost a turnover, so unfortunate for him. Jaden Waddle got the most touches. He had 8 receptions, which resulted in 134 yards and 2 TDs. Najee Harris was the real star of the show. He had 98 rushing yards, 5.8 per carry, and 3 TDs. Alabama only needed to punt once. TCU, Sean Robinson, the quarterback, he had 185 yards and a TD. They brought their backup in, Connor Blasiak. He ran for 1 TD. Their O-line allowed their quarterbacks to get sacked 3 times, but the defensive side for TCU gave Alabama 2 sacks as well. I was surprised by how well Alabama's run defense was. They only allowed 69 total rushing yards. Nice. Still not sold on Mac Jones just yet. He kind of reminds me of A.J. McCarron, who was a former Alabama quarterback, just more facilitator. Mac Jones is good, but he's nothing exceptional. He's great on first down attempts, but not so great on third down attempts. Could be due to pressures. I'm not sure. So we will see how he performs when they eventually play Texas Tech and Georgia. So I watched the Iowa State at TCU game. Iowa State won 37-34. Fortunately, that was a little closer than I wanted it to be. TCU hasn't played a game yet, so I think ISU had a little bit of a field advantage. TCU had 5-star linebacker Marcel Brooks, but he didn't really do too much. ISU's defense was looking really good the first half. Big help from defensive end Jaquan Bailey, who accounted for 3.5 sacks, which included a strip fumble, which eventually led to an offensive touchdown. So props to him. Bailey is top 3, maybe even top 2 in sacks among active players in college football. On Saturday, he set the new ISU sack record, so great for him. Last half wasn't too hot for the ISU defense. Eventually, TCU brought in their true freshman Max Duggan, who started in the second half, and he started torching them. 241 yards and 3 TDs, but ISU slowed him down a little bit with a game-defining interception in the fourth quarter. Overall, I was impressed with ISU's rush defense. They only allowed 99 yards. The real star of the show was Breece Hall. He ran for 155 yards, which is 8.6 per carry, and included 3 TDs and a 75-yard run touchdown, which was done by a great block among the ISU offense. And honestly, Hall has been looking the most consistent among the offensive side of the ball. Then going into more of the offense, Brock Purdy, the quarterback, was a little conservative the start of the game. He was finally showing a little glimpse of his talent towards the end of the first half. But then on the third quarter, he threw an embarrassing throwaway, which led to a defensive TD, which was not very pretty. And it's funny. I told him he needs to throw away the ball a little bit more, but unfortunately it led to a defensive TD. Sometimes I think he tries a little too much, tries to put that hero ball. Matt Campbell has said that he can be a little hard on himself. That's because he's just a real true competitor. But here's some good news. His receivers dropped less balls compared to the last game, and they got their preseason All-American tight end Charlie Kolar back, so those are all great things to hear. He just needs to have Brock Purdy. He just needs to have smarter decisions. I know he can, because I mentioned he's that true competitor, and I think he'll get his stride eventually. I mean, we've seen it happen before, and I don't see him. I don't see him just yet kind of regressing. Next game will be Oklahoma, which will be a tough one, even though they did loss last weekend. But we'll see what happens. Florida played Mississippi at Mississippi, or Ole Miss. Lane Kiffin was the new head coach for Ole Miss. And if anyone knows him, he's an offensive mind. He was a former offensive coordinator for Alabama. And he's had a history of playing pretty good against hard schedules. Florida is a pass-first offense and been told they need to run the ball a bit more. But Dan Mullen has improved his positioning in the SEC. In 2018 and 2019, he had 5 to 6 wins. So he's been showing a little bit of growth, and he has consistency on both sides of the ball. So going to the overall game, Florida beat Ole Miss 51 to 35. Quarterback for Florida, Kyle Trask, looked pretty good. 6 TDs and 416 yards. Running game looked great too. Almost 3 running backs had 50-plus yards, and all the rushers averaged 6.8 yards per carry. Florida is looking like maybe the first or second best team in the SEC, which includes like Alabama and Georgia within those spots. Ole Miss looked pretty powerful on the offensive side. Quarterback Matt Corral threw for 3 TDs and 395 yards. And the run game racked up 170 yards and 2 TDs. No fumbles either, so great on them. Defense just looked pedestrian. They allowed 51 points, but at least in the last half, they only allowed 16 of those 51. I think Ole Miss will get better within time because Lane Kiffin's just getting used to it. And the Florida Gators are definitely a force to be reckoned with. Gators play South Carolina, and I think they'll win. And Ole Miss will play Kentucky, which will be another tough matchup. But I think Lane Kiffin will win that one. So a kind of brief rundown, some other games I watched. Oklahoma got upset by Kansas State, second year in a row. They lost 38 to 35. Looks like Oklahoma is no different than last year, especially in the defensive side. I thought it was going to be a change, but I guess not. Offensively, Spencer Rattler is not as tactical as Baker Mayfield or Kyler Murray. He had 4 TDs, but 3 interceptions, so some little bumps for him. Quarterback for Kansas State, Skylar Thompson, looked great. He had 334 yards and a TD. On paper, that doesn't sound that great, but essentially he just put Kansas State in great field position, especially for the run offense. The run game converted 3 times. So he obviously put them in great standing, got them in the red zone, and just let them do the rest. I think Spencer Rattler is great. He's really talented. I think he might be as talented as some of Lincoln Riley's other quarterbacks. Maybe I should be careful. I don't want to say just yet, but he definitely has talent. I can at least tell you that. He's just having growing pains, and so is Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley has been gifted to work with quarterbacks that have already had more field experience, which was Baker and Kyler. They've played multiple seasons. Spencer, this is his first season, so he has some things to work on, and this will be a challenge for Lincoln Riley. And I have faith in Lincoln Riley. He is one of the most, I think he's probably one of the best offensive college coaches I've seen, so I'm sure he'll pull something up. Oklahoma defense needs to show a little bit more pressure, especially against the quarterback. They only had 1 sack, and they might lose their playoff spot. Jesus, I think my neighbors are playing music or something. I don't know. Let's just try to ignore it. Who knows? I'm moving, so I might not have to deal with this next time. The defending champs LSU got upset by Mississippi State, 44 to 34. Mississippi State quarterback KJ Costello threw for 5 TDs and 623 yards. Holy shit. Quarterback for LSU, Miles Brennan, had a 32 QBR rating, which is not that great out of 100. 3 TDs and 2 interceptions. Run game was pretty pedestrian on both teams, especially for Mississippi State. They had 9 total yards. I knew something like this was going to happen. You're missing Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and more importantly, defensive coordinator Dave Aranda. I mean, you're missing a lot of key pieces that led you to the championship. O-line from both teams was horrendous. They both allowed more than 5 sacks. So that's another problem that needs to be dealt with for both teams. LSU to me was never a top 10 preseason team to me. I mean, honestly, after looking at that game, they're kind of out of the SEC discussion. But I'm happy for Mississippi State, though. I hope they can keep up the good work. I watched the Miami game where they played Florida State. They won 52 to 10. Quarterback Derek King threw 2 TDs and 267 yards. He also rushed for 65 yards. Cameron Harris and Donald Chaney Jr. both ran for 2 TDs for Miami. Florida State only had one pass TD and a field goal. Miami's starting to become this new hot team that people like to watch. And there's 2 reasons. Derek King, he's very dynamic and fluid. He's just fun to watch. He's like showtime for ACC because he's just so mobile and he can throw pretty good. The defense is another reason. Let's look at some of the numbers for the defense. The defense had 6 sacks, 3 total interceptions, and held them to no points in the fourth quarter. So let's talk about these interceptions real quick. So Florida State played 3 quarterbacks on that game. Each one of them had a pick from Miami. Can you imagine just beating the head coach? Well, it looks like he got a pick. Send the next one in. Oh, another pick. 3rd time's a charm. Send the next one in. Oh, another one. I mean, that's just crazy. Their defense is definitely looking really good. I mean, I've been mean to Miami for a few years because Wisco beats them back-to-back in bowl games, but the real turnover chain is back. They're definitely someone to look out for, and they could be a contender for the ACC championship game against Clemson with Notre Dame. So hopefully we'll see a good matchup between those 2 schools.